As the 1920s continued, the political and economic situation in Germany began to approach something we could call stability. In 1925, the French and Belgian armies stopped occupying the German industrial heartland in the Ruhr region, and the economy started seeing steady improvements, including increases in productivity. There were no further major insurrections from the extreme left or the extreme right. This period of time in the Weimar Republic is often called the Happy Twenties or the Golden Twenties. There were a few different factors underlying this change of course for the young democracy, the most important one being the intervention of the United States on the subject of World War I reparations. The original schedule of payments had been grossly unrealistic and led to the occupation of Germany's industrial Ruhr region by French and Belgian troops, later precipitating the hyperinflation that wiped out the savings of many Germans. While several Allied countries were involved in the effort to revise the payment schedule, the plan that was eventually adopted was mostly the brainchild of an American banker and former World War I general named Charles G. Dawes. The U.S. had a great deal to lose if Germany stopped paying reparations, because its banks had made large loans to Britain and France during the war, which they were now repaying with the reparation payments they were receiving from Germany. The Dawes Plan, as it came to be known, successfully stabilized the German currency and made reparations payments more manageable. This dramatically decreased the business risks associated with investing in Germany, and suddenly American banks were pouring money into the German economy. Unfortunately, many of these loans could be recalled at any time, meaning that the debtor would have to repay the creditor in full on a moment's notice. This would lead to economic problems in the 1930s, which would pave the way for German radicalization. But for most Germans in the second half of the 1920s, there was good reason for optimism, as economic prosperity increased and the new open society of the Weimar Republic could finally bear some fruit. This might be a good time to take stock of where German culture was during the Weimar Republic. One recurring feature of newly democratic societies is an explosion of cultural creativity. This was true in Periclean Athens as well as the United States of America. The Weimar Republic was no exception. In the realm of physics, a good deal of quantum mechanics was developed at German universities, including the matrix formulation and the uncertainty principle, by such physics titans as Werner Heisenberg and Max Born. In the arts, playwright and composer Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill produced such classic musical numbers that they have been covered by the likes of Louis Armstrong and David Bowie. German Expressionism and the Dada art movement also had their births here. The Bauhaus architectural movement and architectural celebrities like Walter Gropius, Bruno Taut, and Erich Mendelsohn all made their mark during the Weimar period and would continue to influence the world of architecture long after the end of World War II. German cinema produced such masterpieces as Fritz Lang's 1927 science fiction classic Metropolis, shown here. Billy Wilder, one of my favorite directors, who later made American movies like Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment, got his start in the film studios of the Weimar Republic. In fact, even master of suspense Alfred Hitchcock spent some of the early days of his career collaborating with German studios, something he later admitted had a strong influence on him. Magnus Hirschfeld, a proto-gay rights activist and early sexologist, coined the term transsexual during the Weimar period. This is all to say that while the Weimar Republic was in many ways a messy affair, its legacy lives on in everything from quantum computing to trans rights. The Weimar Republic's freedoms proved to be fertile ground for all of these intellectual and artistic movements, but they also gave more breathing room to much darker aspects of German culture. The Nazis were hardly the originators of most of the central ideas we associate with them. For example, concepts like the stab-in-the-back conspiracy theory, the Third Reich, the Fuhrer, and even the swastika were already in circulation among right-wing circles. In the words of historian Eric Weitz, the words and phrases were by no means Hitler's private invention. They constituted the common language of the right, established and radical, of the Weimar period. Through countless meetings and publications of both the Protestant and Catholic churches and the outpouring of words in learned tracts as well as in crass propaganda, the keywords and key phrases of the right diffused through Weimar society. The obsessive and violent anti-Semitism was no different. One consistent aspect of the far right's ideology was its abandonment of reason. In its place, they presented a world of conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and the occult that defied all logic. For example, the Folkish movement, which predated the formation of the Nazis, embraced a combination of strange ideas about the mystical nature of the Germanic people. Some members of the movement believed that the German race was descended from the survivors of the lost continent of Atlantis. Others believed that they were descended from gods with magical powers that had been compromised when they had sex with ape-like creatures. What they all shared in common was a belief in the innate superiority of ethnic Germans and a hatred for all Marxists and Jews. One such group, the secretive Thule Society, had a political arm that would eventually transform itself into the Nazi Party. It was also the Thule Society that first fashioned the swastika that most people associate with Nazi Germany. When we think of contemporary Germany, we probably think of a technologically advanced country with an educated, urbanized population and a very high standard of living. However, the life of an average person living in 1925 in the Weimar Republic was very different. The German working class lived on subsistence wages. German GDP per capita was only 12% of what it is today in inflation-adjusted US dollars, and the average level of education would be that of a middle schooler. Much of the German population was still rural, with ever-increasing numbers of young people migrating to the cities. We must keep this context in mind when trying to understand the culture war, a German concept from the 19th century, by the way, that ultimately set the stage for the collapse of the Weimar Republic. Many of the revolutionary ideas coming out of Weimar culture felt threatening to a population of Germans that was accustomed to the traditional values that surrounded God, country, and family in Imperial Germany. The fact that the emergence of these new ideas was correlated with real political instability and economic chaos made it seem to many citizens of the Weimar Republic that these cultural shifts were actually at the root of the country's problems. We can see some of this in Hitler's own writing. About 60 years ago, a political collapse such as we are experiencing today would have been just as inconceivable as the cultural decline which has been manifested in Cubist and Futurist pictures ever since 1900. 60 years ago, an exhibition of so-called Dadaistic experiences would have been an absolutely preposterous idea. The organizers of such an exhibition would have been certified for the lunatic asylum, whereas today they are appointed presidents of art societies. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. The extreme right in Germany was not just against modern art, but almost all modern ideas. For example, in the 1920s, two German physics Nobel laureates, Philipp Lenard and Johannes Stark, launched a campaign against what they deemed to be, quote-unquote, Jewish physics, namely the work of Albert Einstein, which they felt was a departure from the Nordic respect for facts and aptitude for exact observation, to quote Stark. After the Nazis seized power, this corner of the culture war reached absurdist proportions when Stark accused Werner Heisenberg, one of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics, of being a quote-unquote white Jew, meaning a non-Jewish promoter of Jewish physics. To protect himself against this dangerous accusation, Heisenberg enlisted the help of his mom, who happened to be friends with the mother of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Himmler, who saw Heisenberg as a valuable asset for the Third Reich, let it be known that the German physicist was not to be bothered. Heisenberg stayed in Germany for the duration of World War II, contributing to the German war effort in a scientific capacity. Had the Weimar Republic's respite from political and economic instability continued, it's possible that the culture war that had been brewing would have subsided, and Hitler would never have come to power. In fact, the United States and the victorious Allies had developed yet another reparations plan to further ease the burden on Germany called the Young Plan. Instead, in 1929, Germany was hit with yet another economic crisis. Unlike the hyperinflation of the early 20s, the Great Depression had gone global. American banks became increasingly risk-averse, worrying about their own financial health. Suddenly, they were demanding that German businesses repay them ahead of time. This took an already dismal economic situation and dramatically amplified its negative effects. The center-left and center-right parties that had governed since the German Revolution of 1918 suddenly found themselves discredited, much to the delight of the German Communist Party and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or as we know them, the Nazis.